Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and its Ukrainian proxy forces. Now, today I've started off with the deep state map, and I've gone all the way back to the 1st of December. And what I wanted to do is fast forward from the 1st of December kind of to where we're at right now to give you, the viewer, the opportunity to see what has transpired over the course of the last 2 months. Look at the methodology of the Russian way of war, this very methodical war of attrition that is designed to wear out the Ukrainian military, at the same time designed to envelop and then capture and then consolidate control over territory. Now we're going to push forward here and show you, the viewer, what has happened during the last several weeks in the Donbass offensive. Look at the area around Pokrovsk, obviously Kharkova, Novoselka, in this area here, as well as that town has just recently fallen within the last 48 hours or so. So here we go. We're going to push forward, and we're going to watch what has happened over the course of the last several weeks. So again, very methodical, steady, operational advance by Russian forces. This salient here essentially disappears over the course of several days. And there we have it. Again, Novosilka. Very specific envelopment and capture operation. Russian forces surround Novosilka from the east, west, northeast. You have interlocking fields of heavy artillery fire, able to conduct fire missions at the Russians' whim. Drone operations of Lancet drones targeting the reinforcement and the supply of Ukrainian forces in Novosilka, and then followed by the general collapse and capture of Novosilka by Russian forces. The same is happening near Pokrovsk. Obviously a much larger nut to crack in terms of the fortifications that were established. If you go back to the original fall of towns like Volodar, Pokrovsk became an incredibly important both defensive outpost and transportation and supply hub for Ukrainian forces. Thus, it was reinforced, fortified, and the Ukrainians are doing everything in their capability to try and prevent the fall of Pokrovsk. However, the Russian forces continue to advance. They have now cut off essentially the 2 of 4 main arterial routes into the city. If we go back to the Rondelli Foundation map and we look at, again, what has happened, if we go clockwise, you have this route here. It is called the TO-406. That area was captured by Russian forces, and now the Russians are continuing to push towards the main E50. At the same time, Russian forces have captured this route as well, which is the TO-504, thus leaving these 2 main arterial routes into Pokrovsk. And again, as we've just talked about, you will slowly see the envelopment of Pokrovsk, in which we will eventually see that all supplies and all capability to reinforce Pokrovsk will be eliminated In all likelihood, you will then see the evacuation of Pokrovsk and then the capture of Pokrovsk, just like we observed down here in Novosilka as well. And this is just repeating itself time and time again. Again, a very methodical, very slow pace, purposely designed to prevent casualties of Russian forces. Again, you hear about Western media talking about human wave attacks and that the Russians are sustaining horrendous casualties. Now, are the Russians sustaining casualties? Yes, absolutely. Are they conducting human wave attacks against Ukrainian fortified positions? No, they're not. Again, this is a very purpose-driven offensive designed to prevent Russian casualties. Even the videos that are released by Ukrainian forces when they're using drones or other systems to target Russian forces, you don't see what the Ukrainians are talking about. You don't see mass waves of infantry. You don't see massed waves of armored vehicles. Again, these are very methodical platoon and company-sized operations because the primary means of the Russian attack vector is heavy artillery, guided glide bombs, and their own drone capability. Again, fix Ukrainian forces and then destroy Ukrainian forces in that zone of operation. And that's what we are seeing, and that's what we are continuing to see. If you go up to the ongoing situation in the Kursk pocket, okay, these Ukrainian forces that have taken this very, very small area in the Kursk Oblast. The width is about 15 kilometers and about 30 kilometers from the most northwestern point all the way to the most southeastern point. So about 30 kilometers in length and about 15 kilometers in width. So again, the Russians have interlocking fire control over this area that the Ukrainians quote-unquote control. It is purposely designed to, and for whatever reason, the Ukrainians are deciding to keep forces in this pocket that are just getting shelled day in and day out, and then they have to reinforce and resupply, and again, it is just it's really amazing to see that the Ukrainians are keeping forces in this Kursk pocket, given the situation, just how dire the situation is. Again, the Ukrainians don't have the same capability in terms of fire support, in terms of having the capability of calling in close air support or the same glide bomb capacity as the Russians do. And this area is essentially very flat, very open. Obviously, we're in the middle of winter, so vegetation is sparse. And again, just an incredibly difficult situation in which the Ukrainians are not properly fortified, and the Ukrainians continue to take casualties. I would argue that Ukrainian casualties, in all probability, vastly outpace Russian, and then the possibility of North Korean army units as well operating in this area as well. And again, you hear about, or the Ukrainians report, that they have caused all these casualties to these alleged North Korean forces. The problem is we just don't have any documented evidence that shows these massed casualties of these alleged North Korean forces. We have seen a total of 2 captured Asiatic males that were captured by Ukrainian forces. Okay, that is the evidence that exists thus far, And at the same time, with that being said, out of Kiev, with Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ministry of Defense within Ukraine, they're claiming they have killed or wounded up to 4,000 North Korean troops in the Kursk pocket. Again, very difficult to verify. And I would argue and continue to argue that the Russians are actually allowing the Ukrainians to stay in the Kursk pocket. It just doesn't make any sense for this endeavor to continue. And for whatever reason, we know that Volodymyr Zelensky can be an incredibly stubborn leader. And once he has an idea based around strategy or tactics, he tends to go with that for quite some time until it is proven to be a complete error in judgment. And then at which point we will see a withdrawal from the Kursk Oblast. But again, right now, the Russians are perfectly accepting of Ukrainian forces, these multiple Ukrainian combat brigades that are condensed in this very small area in which the Russians are and continue to have interlocking fields of fire over this entire region, both in terms of heavy artillery and obviously the heavier glide bombs, which are continuing to be used as well. So the whole concept that the Russians are taking more casualties in its attempt to quote-unquote retake the Kursk pocket is simply nonsensical. Again, the Russian strategy, backed by documented video footage, is to use glide bombs and heavy artillery to engage and reduce Ukrainian units as they continue to be fed into the Kursk pocket. That is what is happening. Now, the Ukrainian message is that they have fortified this area and want to remain in this area because they're killing so many Russians. Think about that for a second. One side has complete air dominance in terms of its capability of utilizing hundreds of glide bombs against infantry, technical, MRAP, armored targets that are not dug into these areas, and interlocking fields of artillery fire. Who's going to take more casualties? Who has more artillery? The Russians or the Ukrainians? The Russians do. Who has more air capability? The Ukrainians or the Russians? The Russians do. Hence, the Russians are allowing them to stay in this pocket to take casualties. Again, the overall strategy of the Russian military is attrition. Attrit the Ukrainian military until the military no longer wishes to fight. And then you see that general collapse of the Ukrainian military. And we continue to see very old males being the vast majority of Ukrainian forces. The army of the old. That's what we're seeing. But that is where we are at for today. Obviously, we're going to continue to monitor. We're also expecting that because of the disallowance of American money, American intel that is going to be slowly cut off from the Ukrainians, it is very likely we will start to see a quickening of this conflict. Again, what has maintained the Ukrainian capability to fight is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the United States, and Western European military capability, both in terms of intelligence and military capacity that has been turned over to the Ukrainian forces. A large component of that intel capability could soon be cut off for Ukrainian forces. The current administration is very tired of this conflict. Now, at the same time, the West and certain elements of the West may be tiring of this conflict, but the Russians have not. As I've talked about before, in terms of future-facing strategy, what the Russians are willing to tolerate. Are the Russians willing to tolerate some sort of Ukrainian NATO entity that exists inside of the Ukraine? No, absolutely not. So thus, the Russians will continue this war. And with that being said, that 90-day slowdown of Western military capacity could greatly impact this conflict in the next several weeks to come. So we will continue to monitor. We will continue to report. As always, thank you for joining us. More to come very, very soon. As always, have a good day.